Welcome to Real Estate Investing Abundance, the show for busy, fulfilled professionals like you to learn how to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. Now, here is your host, Dr. Alan Lomax.
Hello, enlightened investors. Welcome back to Real Estate Investing Abundance. I'm your host, Dr. Alan, and thank you so much for joining us again today. We're delighted to have your presence with us. And we're going to be taking a look at revolutionizing workplace culture. With us is Michael Levitt. He ignites transformation in the realm of human resources, burnout, and workplace culture, wielding his expertise as a global visionary. Recognized as a luminary in health and wellness, he commands influence as one of the top 50 influencers in the field. With his magnetic presence as a keynote speaker, Michael captivates audiences, leaving an indelible mark. As an author, he pens narratives that redefine success and fulfillment. And as the host of the Breakfast Leadership Show, he serves up invigorating conversations that nourish the mind and the soul. So welcome to the show, Michael. You and I just met yesterday when I was on your podcast, and so I'm delighted to be back with you again today. So Michael, take us into the show and just give us a brief story of your background.
Yeah, my background goes all over the place, but I will do it as quickly as I can. I like to identify, or actually my brother identifies me as a reformed accountant. I'm not really sure what he means by that, but my original career was in public accounting and then ventured into IT and then back into accounting when the dot-com bubble burst, which was entertaining. And from there, landed in healthcare and nonprofits, which was kind of a pretty hard shift, but it was not too bad because with nonprofits, you still need to have that entrepreneurial spirit about it, but you just raise funds differently, from donations and government sources instead of the private sector. But my career has, thankfully that accounting foundation served me well because I use those skills every day, even reluctantly if I have to. It's like, oh, great, another spreadsheet. I don't want to look at these things. But what it's done is it's helped me kind of get a better understanding of every industry because as an accountant and working for a CPA firm, I did auditing for several years. So, fortunately, the firm that I was with at the time, we had all kinds of different clients. So I got exposed to pretty much every industry out there, which gave me a lot of insights on how businesses work, how certain industries are different than others, how many commonalities they have, which are a lot. Which has helped me transition throughout my career into different fields, or even in the work that I do today, being able to at least comprehend, the challenges and the strengths of each sector. So that's the work that I do. And as you said at the beginning, working with organizations and individuals on improving workplace culture, preventing, I wish it was more preventing, but it ends up being recovering from burnout, and just having people design their best life. And when they do that, then they have the clarity of life, and obviously that can make a big difference in investing, because if you don't have a clear mind, you're not going to make good investments, and that could impact you financially, cause you stress, cause you burned out. It's amazing how intertwined our lives can be.
Yeah, Michael, I appreciate you really pointing that out, how important a clear mind is, and for investing, and how important to investing actually well-being is. And as we were having our conversation yesterday, there were just a lot of intersections between the work you do and the work that I do in helping investors to not just put their capital out there just any old place, but to really put their capital where it benefits their entire well-being, not just their financial pocketbook there. Well, your recent book is Burnout-Proof, and as you just mentioned, you unfortunately do more recovery in terms of burnout rather than prevention on that. So what are some of the early signs of burnout that leaders should be aware of, and that also we as entrepreneurs or employees, we ourselves should be aware of?
The common signs that I see a lot with individuals and with teams that are approaching burnout. The first one is you check with yourself and see how you've been sleeping lately. Now, if you're a chronically bad sleeper, then that's something else. But for most of us, we usually get a relatively decent night of sleep. But when you're under prolonged stress or burning out, your sleep is definitely impacted. And that it just piles on to the mess because when we sleep, that's when our body repairs the damage that we do to ourselves on a daily basis. I don't care how healthy you are, how active you are. The world beats us up. And unfortunately, some of us beat ourselves up, which is another area to address. But at the end of the day, when you get good restful sleep, your body kind of fixes some things that we break or mishandle during the day. So when you wake up in the morning, if you're refreshed, then you're going to be able to navigate through that day a little bit easier. Yes, there's going to be stressful situations. There's going to be challenges, concerns. If you're investing in, whatever, and if you're investing in the stock market, for example, the ups and downs of that is stressful no matter what. So, as our conversation said yesterday, not exactly, the area that you like spending in, and I'm one that agrees with that. It's like, no, I want something that's going to be pretty static, give good growth, but not be this roller coaster ride kind of thing, which is the market every day. But sleep is definitely one of those areas you got to focus on. If you're not getting good sleep, it's going to impact every other aspect of your life, from digestion, cognitive abilities, your ability to basically work with people. Because it's another sign that we see a lot with people that are burned out or under high stress is they're very irritated. They're short-fused. We see that every day on the road and maybe in the grocery store or anywhere else you happen to go. It just seems like people are just a little bit edgier than they were before. So that's definitely another sign you got to be on the lookout for. And going back to the cognitive ability side of things, when you're stressed, your ability to process information, to recognize information is impacted. So you don't see things clearly. You don't comprehend a simple spreadsheet, for example, or if you're looking at your investment portfolio, for example, and you're looking at it and the numbers just seem like they're bouncing around and you can't really focus or comprehend where you actually are. That's definitely a big warning sign that you might be under some extreme stress and you need to take a step and figure out, okay, what's causing this and what can we do about it. And even to the point, this is a sign that I see a lot too, is the inability to make a decision. You're frozen. Every decision seems like the biggest decision in life you'll ever make, including what are we having for dinner? That's a question every household has. Or if you're a single person, you ask yourself that, what do I want for dinner tonight? And sometimes we don't know, and that's normal, but sometimes when you are burned out, simple decisions are impossible, just because you're just in this state, this foggy state that you just feel like you can't do anything. And a lot of people will ask me, it's like, it sounds a lot like depression. And being someone that has been burned out before and has dealt with clinical depression myself, I will say that the biggest differentiator that I am aware of is when you are burned out, somehow, some way, you still muster up the energy to be able to do things. You grind a little harder and you just go, I'm just going to get through this. But when you're clinically depressed, depending on the severity of it, you don't feel like doing anything and you don't feel like you can do anything and you just stay stuck. So that, and obviously there's a lot more clinical diagnosis that would need to be done for people to figure out where they are on that, but that's probably the biggest thing that I noticed, and having dealt with both of them in my life. So those are the big signs that I see time and time again with people that are approaching burnout, or if unfortunately they are burned out.
Well, that's interesting. I had not really thought of looking at sleep as an indicator of burnout or approaching burnout, but it makes perfect sense. And certainly the short-temperedness, the inability to make decisions. all of those things make perfect sense, because when we're engaged in our work, and it energizes us, and when we reach that point of burnout, all of these other things start stepping in there. So you would prefer to work on the prevention side as opposed to the recovery side. So how can we, as individuals who may be heads of our own organizations, or how can we, as leaders of institutional organizations, how can we create workplaces that prevent burnout?
Well, and that's a nice Freudian slip, but there's actually some truth to that, where, and I mentioned this a lot, and I gave a keynote talk years ago about smartphones, and I love my smartphone. My brother calls it my iBinky because I'm always on the dang thing like a baby with a pacifier. They're great devices because they allow, and laptops too, and wireless internet. Great technology because they allow us to work anywhere at any time, but they have a negative side effect, and that negative side effect is they allow us to work anywhere at any time, and we do. We don't establish boundaries around when we work and when we don't. I often think about my late father, who worked in the auto sector, and he worked in the assembly line. And then later on, he delivered engines to the assembly line. But I never remember Dad coming home with a new engine for my car. I would have loved if he would have done that, but never saw the forklift pulling into the driveway with, a 350 or something like that to throw in the old Pontiac. But I don't know if it would fit, actually, but come to think of it. But anyway, it would have been nice to at least say I thought I could do it. But he never brought his physical work home. But, the mental aspect of working in the auto sector and the ups and downs that sector has, it was stressful for him. And for many of us that are working in office-related jobs or creative jobs or anything that we're using computers, as we discovered, if we didn't know already during the pandemic, we were pretty much able to do everything from wherever we happen to be. But the thing of it is, we don't have those physical reminders of it's time to go home, it's time to stop working. And that's one of the things that we saw during the pandemic too, is on average, people were working longer hours from home than they were when they were in the office. Now, that factored in the commute time because they didn't have the commute, so they would just start working. And or maybe they were a parent and they had kids and they had to make sure the kids were doing their schoolwork while they were at home as well, which then shifted the work times around a little bit. It wasn't easy for a lot of parents, that's for sure. But ultimately, you got to have boundaries around when you work and when you don't, and you need to communicate that as an employer to your employees, and employees need to communicate that to their employer too. It's like I'm not a 24/7 type of machine. Even machines and robots need maintenance. So we need maintenance, which is our sleep and our downtime and our leisure time. So you establish and communicate it and negotiate it with your employer and your employees when you're expected to be working or available to work and when you're not, and stick to it. I know it's hard, but sometimes we just get lost into it, and it could be a job that we absolutely love. And I see this a lot with entrepreneurs. They put in some long hours because they really, really love what they're doing. And in itself is not a bad thing, especially in the early days. You're going to be putting in some additional hours, but eventually the return on investment, which is your time, into the work that you do is going to diminish after a few hours. It's just the quality is not going to be as good because you don't have the clarity, you haven't rested, your eyes are strained. There's all of that factors into it. So, and each individual is different. So you got to figure out, okay, what's that sweet spot for me to work and not work, and work with that. Other things that employers and employees can and do is really, really, really make sure that and these are all I want to say common sense, but they're not. Make sure that you're maintaining your activity, even if you have mobility issues, and let's say you're in a chair or scooter, or maybe you might not even be able to walk or move at all. You can still exercise your mind And you want to do that. You want to stimulate your mind with things and stories and ideas that are outside of your work, because that just allows your creative brain to create and gives you some clarity on the work that you do. So that's really important. And if you're physically able to, yeah, get up and move around. And my smartwatch yells at me. It's like, hey, it's time to stand. Now I'm at a standing desk right now, so it's not going to yell at me right now. But if I was sitting down, it would say, hey, it's time to move. It's time to sit up. So, which is great. And it doesn't go off very often, but occasionally I'm like, oh wow, because you just lose track of time. You're in the middle of something, you're editing something, you're reviewing a document or going through messages, whatever. And when we get lost in time, because we're focused on those things, which again in itself is not a bad thing. It's good to focus on things, but sometimes we have to harmonize that with our physical health. And also, this is something that I see a lot with people that burn out, and even entrepreneurs, even people that are heavy into investing and they're really really active. It doesn't even need to be investors. It can be any field or any role. Is when we are putting in all those hours doing whatever we happen to be doing, unfortunately, we start cutting out things in life that we enjoy to do. Whether it's going to a coffee shop with your friend, going for a bike ride, or playing tennis or pickleball or anything. Or even the other day, I saw the United States beat Pakistan in cricket in a match.
The United States has a
so
cricket team?
now we're gonna. You and I are both surprised. Yes, we do, and we beat Pakistan, who
That's
cricket
their
I
national
think
sport,
is
yeah.
one of their that yeah. So it's like I guess like a clock with no battery. It can happen, and it did, and like, oh wow, it's like, okay, now, which is a good news story, because for me, this complete segue, because it's a global sport. There's a lot of countries that play it, and the United States doesn't, because we pretty much stick to the four, and or three, and then hockey is doing what it does, and soccer is gaining traction finally. But long story short, I think it's beneficial. I love the fact that the U.S. is going to hopefully start getting involved in more international sports besides the Olympics and those things, because we're one planet. We're one. There's one entity of humans on our planet. We're all together, and to be able to learn some new things and create opportunities for people and boost revenue for those organizations. Maybe they get some TV coverage, and all of a sudden that can transform communities, and you name it. There's a lot of positives that can happen from it. So, but yeah, when I saw that, I originally thought, okay, is this an Onion article? This is totally fake. This did not happen. It's like the American cricket team, the American what? It's like cricket, like that little that home device arts and craft things, that kind of cricket. No, 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 the sport. What? It's like, okay, and I haven't gone on YouTube yet to watch any of the videos or highlights, because I want to see how in the world this happened, and I empathize for the Pakistani people, because they can't be happy about this. There's no way they are happy about this
Sure they are.
situation. Oh, that's great. The Americans beat. No, no, I don't think that's the reaction that's going on right now in that country. So, but anyway, again, well, and that's actually an interesting segue, because I find too, and this was my own personal story. When I was burned out, I was a season ticket holder for the Detroit Tigers at the time of my burnout, and that's when they were going to the World Series and the playoffs a lot, between 2006 and 2012, 2013. And, I had season tickets. And when you have season tickets, the way the package was paid for, it paid for your parking, your seats, your meal vouchers, your beer vouchers. You just had to show up. Leave your wallet at home, unless you drove, then you need at least your driver's license. But you don't have to bring anything except your tickets and your vouchers. That's all you had to bring. It was all paid for. So it was like, prepaid basically, but it was still like, this is great. I don't have to spend a dime. And I quit going, because I was so burned out and working too much. I didn't have the energy, and I love baseball. It was one of those things. I was very fortunate in 2012 when the San Francisco Giants won the World Series. They beat Detroit at Comerica Park in Detroit, and I was at that game 4 when the Giants won. Obviously, I was disappointed that the Tigers didn't win, but and this was after my burnout, I was thrilled at the fact that I was at a game where a team won the World Series in person. There's a finite number of people that have had that opportunity over the 150 some years of baseball. It's still a very finite number of people that could experience that. And it was one of those things. My brother and I were there, and he was kind of disappointed for a minute. I said, hold on. We just saw a team win the World Series in person. Take this in. This is a rare occurrence for people. So, but again, when you're burned out, you don't do those things. You skip out on those things. You miss out those things. So I tell people, it's like, I don't care how busy you are, how many hours you're working. Schedule those me time moments, those self-care moments, those fun moments. Schedule them, because what gets scheduled gets done. If you don't schedule it, you're not likely to do it.
Enlightened investors, if you haven't done so already, be sure and click that like button and also click that share so others can take advantage of the content. And finally, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single one of our upcoming episodes. Exactly. Well, a whole lot to unpack there, Michael. And enlightened investors, we are visiting with Michael Levitt today. And you can find Michael at thebreakfastleadership.com. And if you go to thebreakfastleadership.com, you can also get a copy of his recent ebook. Well, Michael, as you were talking about that, one of the things you mentioned is that we as entrepreneurs, we can work 16, 17, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, because we love what we're doing. And I have certainly found myself in that situation. And after several months of doing that, that really takes a toll and it begins to wear on you. And I finally came to a point in place where I said, and I wasn't sleeping well at night. If you work 16, 17 hours a day and then fall into bed, you're taking your work to bed, and you're not going to sleep well doing that. So I finally realized I had to come to a point in place where I had to have a cutoff. And so at 6:30 at night, that's my absolute cutoff. But it's still hard to do that at times, and I find myself breaking my promise to myself and continuing to work another hour, 2 hours. It doesn't happen frequently anymore, but it still does happen from time to time. And I know those things, I'm just cheating myself when I am actually doing that. There's really nothing that important that it can't wait till tomorrow. But we forget that oftentimes. And the other thing you mentioned is that we don't have time to engage in things we enjoy. We don't have time for friends, and we justify all of those things that we're cutting out of our life because we love what we're doing. And it just doesn't lead to a good place, and eventually it does lead to that burnout. So, Michael, why don't you share with us a success story where a company significantly improved its workplace culture and was really successful in reducing burnout. So they were working on the preventative side rather than the recovery side.
It was a multi-site medical clinic, and I think they were in their 3rd or 4th year of existence, and they were averaging around 86% turnover annually. So almost 9 out of 10 people were leaving, and it wasn't just receptionists or helpers or things like this. This was master's level and above clinicians who were just up and leaving because it was a toxic, stressful environment. So I went in and went, ooh, this is going to be fun. Let's see what we can do here. And after a year, the annual turnover rate was reduced from 86% to 6%. And there was only a couple people that were, using a Jack Welch term, dehired. because they just weren't the right fit for the organization. But everyone else stayed. And we didn't give anybody a raise. We didn't give them extra vacation time, any perks. We didn't give them anything from a monetary standpoint, which is what a lot of people think, oh, you bribed them and it got better. No. I find with people, when you give them raises, while they appreciate it, too many people, unfortunately, as you know, as an investor and people that deal with money, they just rise their costs up to that new level. So they never are able to save, invest, or things like that, because they just put their money into other things that are consumed and not asset building. But what I found that helped was listening, creating an arena where people could trust each other and be able to be open and honest about their experiences, what they were seeing, and all of that. And basically coming in as an outsider, there was an element of trust for me, even though I was paid for by the organization, to obviously be quiet and hold things confidential and not share with others what people were saying about others or the management or anything like that. And there was this trust that we developed. And also I asked them a question, which a lot of managers should ask this, although they won't, because they feel it puts them in a vulnerable space. But I highly recommend managers ask this question. Okay, if you were in my seat and you were running this organization, what would you change? And you can say whatever, no, it's not going to hurt my feelings. It's not going to whatever. And the people, because they trusted us, you would say, all right, this is what I'd like to do, and this is what I'd like to see done, and all of that. And what was great about that was there was a whole lot of low-lying fruit that could easily be implemented, and we did. Like within 3 months, there was like drastic amount of improvements that were suggested by the team that were implemented. So what that did was it created an environment where they felt trusted, valued, that their input was being heard and acted upon. And that changed the temperature of the organization from an organization that was going through turnover, had a reputation of being a toxic workplace, to an organization where people were applying for roles that weren't open because they wanted to be a part of it. And it was, in this situation, it was quite simple, but obviously it took time and gaining trust and walking the walk. But ultimately, it boils down to listening. People need to feel heard, valued, trusted, so they can trust management to do what they say they're going to do, with the unified goal to improve healthcare outcomes for people in an area that was underserviced and had a lot of chronic disease issues, and bringing access to care to a community that had lacked it for a very long time. So it was one of those, win-win-win type of situations where it was well worth the effort to do that, because it made such a huge impact on those clinicians, the staff, the community, everyone. So it's one of those things in my life, and there's many stories like that, but it was that one really stuck out because I know the ripple effect that it had on the community, not just on an individual or a team, but it had a positive outcome for everybody involved.
Well, that's quite impressive. 3 months may seem like a long time, but in organizational transformation and change that I've been involved with, 3 months is a very short period of time for the kind of total organizational change that you are speaking about. As we were speaking yesterday, one of the things that I think we spoke about was that it's important for leaders to really take their own journey and to look at their own issues. And it's clear to me that in this organization, these leaders clearly had that capacity, but they weren't employing that. What in your position as consultant, how did you help those leaders to make that shift from being untrustworthy and not able to listen? How did you help them? Because if the leaders had not really taken their own journey, you could have talked to them night and day and they wouldn't have made those transformations. So they were already on that path. So what did you do to really help them to see what it was that they were doing was damaging?
I shared that, the team didn't trust them.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them, do you trust your people? Well, of course we do. We trust them.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, good, because if you don't trust them, why are they here? It's like, no, we trust them. They're really good. I said, when was the last time you told them that? And they thought, and they started to clue in really quick. It's like, okay, some people need the positive affirmations are good, but I think just the approach of things. It's like, don't treat them as an outsider or somebody that you're referring to. So they are part of this team. You're all working together on the greater good, or collaborating with someone on a case or a patient, whatever. So this is your teammate. If you want to be successful, they need to be successful. They need to be heard. Listen to their inputs. Yes, you have obviously more experience than them, depending on the person, but their inputs should be considered. I'm not saying put it through, but they should be considered. And I said that to both of them, both parties. And then we brought them together first, in smaller groups, and then as a collective, just to kind of celebrate, what has been done. And I told them, this is all you. I didn't do anything. I just asked questions, and I asked you some questions, and you asked me some questions, and all of the things that we have today, and the improvement, and the change of direction and tide. Like I said, we didn't change the staff, we didn't change the management. It was all the same parties. Because a lot of people say, well, we're just going to clean house and start again. Well, I've seen organizations do that, and guess what? It's the same crap, different pile. It's just because the way things are done. You can change the people all you want, but if the environment nurtures this type of behavior, it's going to come back again. There'll just be different players playing the same role. So you gotta approach it differently. And it was just getting them to understand that they want to be trusted, and they want to be trustworthy, and they want to trust their people. And same thing with management. And it boils down to communication more often than not, and perception, and fear, and anxiety, and you name it, all kinds of emotions. And ultimately, it just boils down to, okay, there's going to be certain people, like with doctors, for example. There's going to be some doctors you get along with really well. There's going to be some doctors you're going to be looking at that scalpel going, not to wreak havoc or harm anybody, but I'm sure there were some that were like, I don't like this doctor. So well, then limit your work with them if you can. We can structure things for the benefit of everybody. I don't want to do that as the norm, because then it's just not a great environment. But you need to learn to work with people. And I saw situations where there was relationships that were quite cold at the beginning that warmed up quite a bit because they got to understand each other. And I think that's a takeaway for everybody, is just seek to understand where people are coming from. Yeah, they may have a different opinion than you, but seek to understand why they feel the way they feel, or why it's important for them to be supportive of this cause versus this cause. And even in politics, and I try to avoid that as much as I can. And seek to understand, why people support one political party versus the other. From just a conversation, non-judgmental, just curiosity, and approaching it going, okay, why is that important to you? Because it can be eye-opening. I'm not going to say you're going to switch parties, but you'll have an awareness. And as I tell people, having family and friends that are part of every political party under the sun, there's a lot more common than there isn't. Yes, there's some polarizing differences, and we tend to get focused on those. But I think working on the commonalities first, will help everybody in the long run. And unfortunately, sometimes it just doesn't seem like anybody wants to even approach that. It's like the art of negotiation. It's just like, okay, what do we have in common? What are the ones we agree on? Okay, let's ratify all those. Okay, that's taken care of. Okay, now we can debate and discuss the quote unquote hot button items and all of that. And ultimately, I always remind politicians, it's what your people want. It's what the constituents want, not what you want. But that's a completely different subject altogether.
Well, enlightened investors, we're having a very engaging conversation with Michael Levitt. Michael, tell us about the Breakfast Leadership Organization and how it is that we can get in touch with you to work with you to improve our organizations.
Yeah, my organization, it's kind of evolved over the years. It first started off as just content creation, a podcast show, some keynote talks and whatnot, and then ventured into consulting for individuals and organizations because I despise burnout. I despise organizations that are struggling with their culture, because not the companies themselves, but just the fact that they have to struggle with those challenges, because I know what healthy organizations look like. I know what it does. It improves what they make, improves the relationships within their organizations and their communities. We get better products and services when organizations are healthier. They retain great people and they do amazing things. So that's why I do what I do. And best way to find me is just go to breakfastleadership.com. There's a contact page. Scroll down towards the bottom. I think there's a link up at the top right that says contact as well. From there, you can get access to our blog, links to our podcast, links to our books, all the things that we have going on. But it's been a pleasure to be on the show with you, Alan. Always enjoy our conversations.
Well, Michael, it's been a pleasure having you. Enlightened investors, take advantage of what Michael has to offer there. Take a look at his website, get in touch with him, and get to know Michael. He's a good person to know. Michael, thanks for being with us today. Enlightened investors, if you have enjoyed our show, please take a moment to subscribe and go to Apple Podcast. And we'd really appreciate it if you would leave us a rating and a review. Until next time, live abundantly, and we'll see you in the next episode. Enlightened investors, wait, don't go just yet. I just want to remind you about our recently launched webinar that you will not want to miss. If you're at all curious and would like to learn more about how real estate investing can diversify your investment portfolio, alleviate the anxiety associated with Wall Street swings, leverage your 401ks and IRAs to substantially increase the return on your investment, and do all of this with turnkey, hands-off passive real estate investments, then you'll want to immediately go to stevetalker.com/webinar. In the webinar, we'll also address the common dubious investment schemes that you want to avoid. To access the webinar, go to stevetalker.com/webinar. I look forward to seeing you in the webinar.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Investing Abundance, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, a company working for passionate professionals like you to develop financial independence built on solid passive real estate investments. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steve Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steve Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. For resources to develop your financial independence, connect with us at stevetalker.com.